Okay, welcome back to intellectual property. In this lecture, I'm going to be talking about trademark in things other than words. Okay, so how does that work in practice, right? Well, we use a lot of the same factors that we would use in thinking about word marks. We just use them in a different way, right? So these Polaroid and sleek craft, these are factors named after particular cases, and courts look to these factors to think about whether a likelihood of confusion exists and to think about, as a consequence, whether a accused use of a mark is infringing. Now, I'd suggest that, like we've seen in some other circumstances, the use is kind of backward in the sense that more often than not, I suspect a lot of courts or a lot of judges are deciding whether they think a use is infringing and then using the factors to explain why they reach that conclusion rather than using the factors to inform the outcome of their decision. But, perhaps that's excessively cynical. And the factors in question certainly do shape the infringement analysis. Now, how does this work in the context of non-word marks in relation to products? Well, let's look at one particular important Supreme Court case, Qualatex V Jacobson. So what happened here? Qualatex is a company that manufactures dry cleaning pads. So those are the pads that dry cleaning companies use on the machines that they use for pressing clothing, and Qualatex was a really dominant player in the dry cleaning pad industry and remains so. And Qualatex distinguished its products from its competitors by using a distinctive, they call it a distinctive gray-green color. It's kind of a drab olive green color on all of their pads. Well, one of their competitors, Jacobson, started producing pads in a similar color, and Qualatex brought a infringement action against them for it, saying you can't produce pads in the same color as ours. That's going to create a risk of confusion, and the color of our pads, the color of our dry cleaning pads, is communicating information about source to consumers and therefore can be a trademark. Well, Jacobson loses in the district court, but the Ninth Circuit reverses on the ground that the color of a product is not the subject matter of trademark protection. Well, Qualatex appeals or petitions for certiorari, and the Supreme Court reverses the Ninth Circuit, holding that no, that's wrong. Color can be the subject of trademark protection so long as it actually communicates information about source to consumers. In other words, it doesn't necessarily communicate information about source, but if the trademark claimant can show that the color in question has taken on secondary meaning to consumers in relation to the product category in question, then the color of the product can be protected by trademark, right? So in this circumstance, the district court heard evidence and concluded that in fact the color of the Qualatex pads was communicating information about source to the consumers of dry cleaning pads. In other words, people in the dry cleaning business, when they saw a pad in this color, they knew that it was a Qualatex pad precisely because Qualatex had used that color exclusively, right? And then the color of the pad itself had come to communicate information about source to consumers. Ergo, if Jacobson started producing pads in the same or similar color, there was a likelihood of confusion. There was a risk that consumers of dry cleaning pads would be confused about the source of the pads and might purchase Jacobson pads believing they were Qualatex pads. Now, Jacobson responded that, no, this is wrong, right? Color shouldn't be the subject matter of trademark protection, and they gave several reasons why that might be the case, right? First, they argued that it's just too hard for courts to figure out whether an accused product is infringing on a registered or a product in which the producer is claiming trademark protection in the color. And the court says, well, trademark is always hard, right? It's always hard to figure out whether an accused mark is too close to the mark that's being claimed, right? It's difficult in the case of word marks. The fact that it's difficult in the case of color marks doesn't mean that courts can't do it. And they'll just have to muddle through, as it were. They can figure out whether the use of a particular color is close enough to be infringing under the circumstances, just as well as they can with any other kind of mark, right? The question is, ultimately, does the color communicate information? And if the color does communicate information, if the color has secondary meaning to consumers, right, then it's just a mark like any other kind of mark. So it really emphasizes the extent to which, when we think about trademark protection, what we're talking about is any sign or any quality of a product or service that is meaning laden, right? That consumers can understand to communicate information about the product and where it comes from. Now, Jacobson also says, look, if you start letting people claim trademark protection in colors, well, it'll be a disaster because we're going to run out of colors. There won't be enough colors for everyone to use. Right? Well, the court says, no, there's a lot of colors out there, and you're posing a hypothetical problem that you haven't shown has actually arisen. Therefore, we're not going to prevent trademark claims in colors because, Jacobson, you could choose other colors, right? In addition, the court says, look, we know that there's precedent out there saying that color isn't the subject of trademark protection, but it's really old and it relates to pre-Lanham Act trademark law. So we're not bound by that precedent. And under the Lanham Act, the concept of trademark law, the concept of a trademark is broad enough that color can fit within it. Furthermore, it says, look, the color is also distinct from the trade dress of the product itself. Okay, now, finally, there's a question of functionality, right? And the court says, here we don't have that problem, right? It's just a color. We're not worried about functionality under the circumstances. You might want to think about that question as well. Do you think the color is functional? Why do you think Qualatex chose this particular color? And what does it mean to think about functionality in relation to the color of a product? In other words, how would we know whether the color of the Qualatex pads is functional or not?